Hello and welcome to the world tonight. I know Adam's doing the introduction for once. How wild is that? I'm joined by Peter, who is currently out in the field. And by out in the field, I believe eating lunch or at a restaurant. So, you know what? It's led me to have to be the exciting person to really project what we're going to be talking about this week. And what are we going to be talking about? There's a lot of stuff. We're going to be talking about the EU-UK Brexit talks breaking down, talking about Morocco and Israel normalizing their relations, Biden's defense pick, vaccine distribution finally picking up across the world, and finally the Time Person of the Year. And obviously we'll get onto the loser of the week. So I'm just going to open up and talk about the EU-UK Brexit talks breaking down. So yes, it seems like that no deal, the no trade deal existing between the EU and the UK is looking far more unlikely as negotiations are ending this Sunday. Both sides, that being the President of the European Commission and also the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, have said that negotiations and the likelihood of success are incredibly unlikely. They can be extended, and the German Foreign Minister has hoped that they will be, as they believe that they need just a few more days to actually nail down any real disputes currently stuck between the two sides. But I'll just pass it over to Peter. Peter, what are your thoughts currently on the EU-UK Brexit talks, and where are they heading?
Yes, indeed, a very important day in the saga coming to an end in the Brexit negotiations. And I do want to say, yes, I am in the field enjoying, nice food before the restaurants are shut down here in my state again. But to the more serious point, this is obviously, it looks increasingly likely that no deal is going to be the option executed by the British government and the European Union. Of course, it should be noted that most of this agreement negotiation has been agreed to. I mean, they do have an arrangements in place for trading whatnot. The issue that is, of course, causing the trouble here is state aid and the following of regulations. This is where the two sides are clashing. The EU wants the United Kingdom to follow its rules should they strike a deal, and also, of course, maintain some of the state aid that the European Union does on fair grounds. Britain, of course, argues that because it's leaving, it is in its right to not have to do this. Of course, this has set off the tension. It should also be noted that the controversial internal market bill provisions about Northern Ireland were removed in an agreement earlier this week. So yeah, I mean, I'm not shocked. This is from what's been reported about no deal. I mean, very harsh conditions being offered by both sides, and it's very interesting to see, two sides playing hardball, especially in an economic downturn.
Yeah, entirely. And speaking of that internal market bill, what does it actually mean now for how obviously a hard border has to exist somewhere? But what's the situation on that looking like now?
I mean, there really hasn't been a lot of offerings. I mean, the controversial things were about, what ran the United States government the wrong way was, the customs checks. I mean, there obviously will have to be, something to be done with, but who knows? I mean, this whole entire saga changes, it feels like, by the day. And I mean, I'm pretty sure as we speak here, they're probably still trying to work out a deal on some sort of miracle basis.
Yeah, and just to expand upon it a bit more, there have been a few controversies that have formed out of these trade talks. So one such example is the UK trying to circumvent the EU by appealing directly to the French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel, but the Boris Johnson was rebuked in that sense, that they wanted to try and keep that unified line. So there are clearly some difficult negotiations going on. It definitely seems to have upset the British government that ultimately they weren't able to appeal directly to a member state. What do you think? If you have any thoughts on the way the EU is going about these negotiations?
Well, I mean, my view on the negotiations were always the European Union was never going to make this an easy deal for the British to leave because they obviously saw a member state was leaving the club. And what you do if you really want, operate under harsh tactics is you have to make a very hard example of others of what happens when you leave. And I think the European Union has obviously done what it stated it was going to do, make tough line on what it saw fit. I mean, there was always going to be problems towards this stage about what the two countries have sought. I mean, many in the Tory party have wanted making Britain Singapore on the Times, basically, giving the finger to Europe and making this free market enterprise up. And the Europeans know that the Britons may do that, and they obviously see that as unfair. That basically someone out on the continent who just left the membership club basically wants to run around making their own regulations. Already, we've seen this week. The United Kingdom, in a way of trying to appease the United States, removing its tariffs on Boeing, which is something no one, I think, could expect or saw. So I think it's very much both sides are playing a grandmanship. It's just the question is, will someone bend to give up something, or are we on the final cliff of the end of this process ending with no deal?
Yep, and the final controversy I just wanted to quickly look towards is the return of everyone's favorite conflict, the Cod Wars. Now, just to expand upon this, it's been stated that 4 Royal Navy patrol ships will be used to protect UK fishing waters in the event of a no-deal Brexit. So those patrol ships will be sent out to any trawlers or any European fishing vessels that go beyond their waters, because that's been the main sticking point of a lot of these negotiations, is the focus on the fishing industry. And it's a fascinating focus, partly because it appeals to that it's a primary industry. It appeals to that sort of made in the UK sort of idea, but it's also a fascinating thing to fixate on because of all jobs matter, of course, but in terms of what the impact of a no-deal Brexit would be compared to the impact of a deal and what that would have on the fishing industry, they're not something that can be weighed up. So it has been a fascinating strategy to see the UK government fixate on this as being one of the real red lines. Do you have any thoughts on that use of that use as a sort of negotiation chip?
Well, I would say, there's a lot of pride with the fishing stuff, but I think there's a candid reality that fishing only accounts for 1 or 2% of British GDP, economic GDP, and there are more important things at play. The financial service sector. The city has said numerous times it does not want to leave without some arrangement. Now, the city, in its case, did get most of its arrangements through, mainly from pushing people in the Chancellorship to do that. But I do think it's interesting see this fishing thing. Confrontation. It should be noted that Britain has had numerous other cod wars and lost them to Iceland. Always fun. So yeah, they can try. It feels more like it does more of an attempt at basically putting national pride basically over economics in a sense.
Yeah, that's my interpretation of it, at least, and it has been interesting to follow along. But is there anything else you want to add on EU-UK Brexit talks, or would you like to see us move on?
I have one more point.
I'm sure that's very. Just to distract for a little bit, what are you eating at the moment?
Well, I just finished eating a French fry.
I respect the hustle.
Back to the serious point, I apologize, folks, for this. Is that no? I think that the more important, what I think this process has shown is that it's very hard to achieve a trade deal in a short amount of time. People can say all they want, we can get a trade deal and this and that, but getting a trade deal with the European Union was never going to be simple, and I think this is the reality stage of, I think the British government's going to be learning a lot more. you can talk, but a lot of countries are still, at the end of the day, going to dictate how these conversations go.
Yep, I completely agree. Okay, fantastic.
Yes.
So the next big news story of this week has been another Arab country normalizing its relations with Israel. So this has been just to expand upon further. So this is Morocco, which has decided to normalize ties with Israel. Now, Morocco is again another one of these examples, sort of similar to the United Arab Emirates, where they haven't really had any major conflicts with the Israel itself, or at least not in recent history. They've had sort of very, lukewarm relations, but nothing flaring too much. And this is a particularly interesting one as well, because as a part of, or actually, let me quickly just check this. Because I believe now, correct me if I'm wrong on this, because it may have been some magazine source or this may be an official thing, is that as a part of this, the US agrees to recognize Western Sahara, which is a disputed area of Morocco, which seeks independence as a part of Morocco. Let me just quickly clarify.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, cool. Because the reason I want to be very careful with this, because this is such a monumental thing for a number of reasons. So I'll obviously talk about this and then I'll pass to Peter. But one of the major reasons why this is negative from the US perspective is that it doesn't directly benefit the United States in the way that it is giving a very, very big plus to Morocco by recognizing this disputed region, while also weakening its stance on areas like Crimea when it's talking about Hong Kong, because ultimately, despite this being such a internationally, in international law, this is such a difficult area, by taking such a decisive stance, it does in a way undermine the United States position on Crimea being Ukraine, or the sort of independent nature of Hong Kong. So yeah, from an Israeli perspective, this is fantastic because they're continuing to normalize relations with Arab countries. It's emboldening them. It's showing Iran that this isn't the place. Israel isn't going to be fought against by its neighbors. But yes, Peter, what do you think? Do you think that the recognition of Western Sahara as a part of Morocco is as big as a deal as I personally think it is?
I think it's a big deal. I think recognizing this and the United States basically saying, yeah, we take Morocco's views on the Western Sahara thing, and it should be noted, Western Sahara, the disputes over that are many in Western Sahara think they're their own country. And it should be noted that this deal has won some criticism. Senator Jim Inhofe, the Senate Armed Services Committee chair here in the United States, blasted this agreement for recognizing Morocco's claim to that, which was a direct contradiction of what American foreign policy on that issue has been for over 40 some odd years. But no, I think it's a big deal. I mean, look, it's great. Sure, for Israel, it's a good win. I mean, it's a normalization. Another country you can say hello in a nice manner. But I mean, from a U.S. perspective, this is a very questionable agreement in terms of the merits that they agreed to with the Moroccans.
Yeah, especially because they're not getting anything directly out of it. They're using their own position as a means to
no military aid, no economic aid. It's very questionable.
And to further this, this comes after recently. I say recently, a few months ago, UN-led talks between representatives Western Sahara and Morocco broke down. So it's already a very volatile situation in the UN. And to suddenly lose a major player as one of your backers, as one of your mediators, by not recognizing it as a part of Morocco, they've lost such a major. The Western Saharans have lost such a major part of their international stance. So. Yes, it is a very fascinating deal because it's not like the UAE agreement or any of the other. I mean, obviously with something like Sudan, Sudan got something out of it, but in a way, the United States was still. It seemed like the United States was gaining something, but with this, it's specifically interesting because it seems like the U.S. is really just sacrificing the long term in a way for the short term benefit of an ally. Which it's Israel's still an ally, but yeah, I just find it a very interesting move.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, look, it's a big, win for the Israeli government. It's another, country in its, respective alliance now. And I mean, look, credit to the Israeli Foreign Office to getting this, agreement. But yeah, I mean, it's not going to be it's not a great, agreement for Western Sahara, and it's a quite interesting range of seeing how America now approaches many other territorial disputes. Is it more willing to flex this? Now, obviously, of course, the agreement that is struck was struck by the outgoing Trump administration. Whether a Biden administration, whether it decides to keep this arrangement or not, is up to, of course, their foreign policy team, who will have to make this decision probably on day one, and when their Secretary of State pick is probably confirmed by the Senate.
Yep, I completely agree with that. It'll be interesting. And just to talk a bit more about Israel's relations with the Arab world, recently we had a very prominent Saudi prince who was close to the ruling royals, Turki Al Faisal. He, in a I believe it was a press conference or a panel with the Israeli foreign minister, he lambasted Israel as a Western colonizing power and accused of incarcerating Palestinians, and I quote, in concentration camps under the flimsiest of security accusations. So, yeah, there are many. So, I mean, the reason I bring this up is because a big element of what's been happening with Israel's foreign policy, pursuits, is that it's always been this end goal of normalization of ties with Saudi Arabia. That's really been the big gain or the big hope. But clearly, there is an internal split within Saudi Arabia of if this is actually the best course of action. And we're seeing that come to the front. Especially interesting because it was done in the presence of the Israeli foreign minister. So this was a very major setback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting to see this press conference occurring. I mean, it's very different from what the Saudis have been saying for some months now. Very much cheering along all these negotiations. But it's interesting to possibly see maybe a rift to more like the modernizers in Saudi Arabia, which again means very differently than what most people would assume. Moving from the 15th century up to the 18th century. Of course, that's what modernization in Saudi Arabia is. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see, and what more, if anything, MBS himself approves to push on this topic about normalization with Israel.
Well, to be honest, one of the reasons why Saudi princes have come out is because of the fact that Netanyahu revealed that he had a surprise meeting with the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. So there has clearly been a bit of internal, diplomatic betrayal is probably the wrong word, but a misuse of confidentiality in this, because it's a major thing. And to be fair to Netanyahu, which I very rarely do, he is attempting to try and consolidate his own government, trying to make himself seem very popular in a very volatile time where everything seems to be going wrong for him. And clearly that has had some consequences on a wider foreign policy front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And on Netanyahu's point, I mean, Israel's heading to another election. Yay.
Possibly. I mean, who knows?
Possibly, though. The likelihood is they will probably head to an election. And I think it's interesting now, especially on this issue, to possibly think, look, maybe he's going to try to run on this as his, statesman's accomplishment as Israel's prime minister. And it's also interesting to think that should he lose the next election, the likely replacement, Naftali Bennett, may have some interesting views on this subject as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to briefly talk about the election, since we brought it up. So just as a sort of, I guess, clarification for everyone, unless you've not been following Israeli politics as intensely as we all have, essentially what has happened is that after the election this year, which had followed 3 other elections, a unity government was formed between Netanyahu's Likud party, which is a sort of more conservative party, and along with his traditional allies from the right, as well as the Haredi parties and a variety of other small offshoots who decided to leave their parties to support Netanyahu, but also with Benny Gantz's Blue and White party. So what's happened recently is that the rift between the Blue and White and Likud has grown much, much larger. And essentially what has happened is that the opposition leader, Yair Lapid, has stated that he wants another election. He's presented this bill, which is currently going through the processes of dissolving, which would allow the Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament, to dissolve. What was needed was a major coalition partner from the government to actually support it, and that has happened with Blue and White supporting it. So now the opposition has the numbers to call for another election, and that has made Bibi Netanyahu very concerned because the polls aren't looking very good for him. Right, so that's the very broad sort of, I guess, context. But what's also happened, I believe, 2 days ago, is that Gideon Sa'ar, who is a long-time member of Likud, a very popular member, but also a long-time critic of Netanyahu, has decided to leave Likud and form his own party called the New Hope, very Star Wars sort of name there. But in that, thank you very much. In that separation, what it means for Netanyahu is a lot of his support is being drawn further away from him. You mentioned Naftali Bennett. He has his own very sort of like far-right party, which is gaining support from Likud. And now that one of the most popular members besides Netanyahu himself has left Likud, there is definitely a fracturing on the right. I mean, there is already a fractured left in Israel, and now there seems to be a fractured right. An election is looking like it's going to be happening, and a very divided opposition. But they're also quite popular, as polls show.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing on Naftali Bennett, since that is at the moment looks like Netanyahu's main challenger. It will be interesting to see because Bennett has criticized Netanyahu's COVID response very heavily as well.
It's why he's so popular at the moment.
Yeah, because Bennett, of course, it should be noted, is a former healthcare executive. So in this case, this is a very big area of expertise for him. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether Bennett and Yatzad, the current opposition leader, how their 2 fates go. Who knows? Those 2 maybe, may in the future be in the same government together as, dance partners, or they want to oust Netanyahu.
This is the thing with Gideon Sa'ar as well, is that he may be the leader, the actual opposition leader to that's facing Netanyahu rather than Bennett, because Bennett has actually seen a significant amount of support with the rise of his New Hope. Now, obviously, this is based off just a few polls, so we have no idea if this will actually stick around.
And he's a popular politician as well, to his credit as well.
But who knows? Again, we may see, with the last few elections, we saw a number of mergers, see many different political factions work together and then split. So who knows? Maybe there is a united anti-Netanyahu coalition on the right with Bennett and Gideon Sa'ar, and we'll see. Maybe that's something that actually forms. Another interesting thing will be to see what the left does. And when I say the left in Israel, the left is more referring to centrists and liberals, as the actual left wing is much smaller. But in terms of what Benny Gantz did, who was anti-Netanyahu for his entire political career of the last few years, but then eventually joined in government with him as a sign of national unity. And then you have Lapid as well. who has also been very anti-Netanyahu for a very, very long time, since 2015 or so. So there is a wide variety of opposition to Netanyahu that he is going to have to try and circumvent. And yet, it's seeming like he may as well, because it's what he always does.
Well, yeah, I mean, on this final point, I mean, underestimating Benjamin Netanyahu is, as people have said in Israeli politics, is one of the dangerous things anyone can do, since Bibi has that killer instinct to win.
Yeah, I mean, but then again, he's never had to, or at least I can't recall him having to face an opposition of this size before.
Well, no. But to be fair to Netanyahu, I mean, the man lost in 99 or 98. Yeah. And then also came in, Likuchwitz's worst performance a few years later, and then came back. I mean, so who knows? I mean, look, did you mention this will be his toughest fight? But, Bibi's been here and done that, so I think it'll be interesting to see how he handles, and evolves.
Indeed. That's a great discussion, actually.
Yeah, I mean, moving on to our next topic. Yes, I'm back in control. I'm joking. Haha. No, next topic is the final delivery of the COVID vaccine that is moving very rapidly at the fast pace. Noted, the United Kingdom approved the Pfizer vaccine last week and has already started using it on patients. And also is now rumored that the Oxford vaccine is on its way to being approved here in the United States. So the vaccine is being moved on. And the beginning of Operation Warp Speed here in the U.S. will start commencing with the first, group getting these vaccines.
Operation Warp Speed. Anyway, it's a relief, to say the least. This was a really fascinating moment where I think the second person in the UK to get it, William Shakespeare, which was a great coincidence. He gave a fantastic interview with CNN where he just exemplified how British people are. And I would 100% recommend checking that out, because it is very funny and gives you an insight into old people in the UK and how great they can be. But yeah, it really does just represent the stage of relief as we get to a point in the coronavirus where we will still continue to need to stick to the number of regulations, such as wearing masks, social distancing, and all that, as more and more people are vaccinated. But really does offer a light at the end of the tunnel. One of the things that I actually wanted to ask you about, Peter, in relation to this, is how do you think that the Facebook conspiracies about vaccinations and how they're microchipping us and all that, how that may affect us and our response to the coronavirus?
Well, look, I think it's going to be hard. I mean, people have fears. I think there's a fear that this being rushed. Should know, I will put a caveat there. I am an investor in one of these companies that that did create one of these vaccines. But yeah, I mean, I think I think you got to get big name people to take it. I mean, we've seen the outgoing president of the United States, Donald Trump, say that he will take the vaccine. He will do it on TV or on Twitter to say it works. We've seen other celebrities say they will do the same.
And other former presidents as well.
So yeah, I mean, you have a lot of people saying that they want to take it. So I think that's the best way you do it. It's just get big name figureheads to take it and say it's safe. And it's the best thing to do. And I think currently, I think most polls say 50% of Americans plan on taking the shot. So I think obviously, getting that up to 70 or 80, which is where they really want to hit the target line, would be somewhere of a successful win for the global community on this pandemic.
Yeah, well, to be honest, it obviously needs to be higher for it to effectively work. But yeah, I mean, the real hope is that by having politicians like Donald Trump actually taking this, it will tout to his supporters that this is something that's okay to take. And it's the same by having Obama take it, about having George Bush take it, by having Bill Clinton take it. It's just really exemplifying that this is something to not be scared of. And really, here's hoping to that. because God knows we want to get back to normal. And to be honest, I think what will be interesting to see in terms of just a bit of foreign policy, or just like the world in general, is which countries miss out on being able to access vaccines effectively, because obviously it costs money, costs, beyond actually purchasing the vaccine itself, it costs logistics, the ability to properly actually get it to people. So I wonder what sort of strategies the United States, maybe China, maybe Russia, the EU, all these big players will try to actually, increase their influence by actually helping people out in countries that can't afford it to the same extent that we can.
Well, I can say on the U.S. side, just because having watched, and I would recommend this to people. Last week's 60 Minutes had a good segment on what the response would be once this would roll out with Operation Warp Speed. I know Adam loves that name, and it's their hope is, again, I mean, in Pfizer's case, Pfizer has said its vaccine will mostly be prioritized to Americans in their case, and there's the broad agreement that the Oxford vaccine, should it be regulatorily approved, is going to be more the one that's going to be more in the developing world than the Pfizer vaccine, because the Pfizer one requires 2 doses to be effective. But yeah, I mean, I think in terms of rollout, just hoping it, I know here in the U.S., for example, the United States military is going to be very much in charge of the rollout, with other private companies like FedEx doing the delivery and whatnot. I don't know how it will roll out in Europe or China, but it's to hope that they also roll out smoothly, and here in the U.S. that there's enough reserves to make that vaccine, available to the public when they see it fit to make this for mass distribution.
Yep, I completely agree. And besides that, I don't have much else to talk about it beyond it just being a relief. Do you have any final thoughts besides everything you've said so far?
To anyone who watches this, just take the bloody damn vaccine when it's available.
Yes, and to be honest, even when you do take the vaccine, make sure as regulations continue to be requested, that we adhere to them and ensure we keep everyone around us safe.
And as I say, folks, we all did the vaccine. Those horrible things that we have had to live with can all go away.
Exactly. Maybe we won't have to hear about Mitch McConnell or any sort of Senate.
Well, I mean,
loan relief and that kind of thing.
Yes, I'd also like to burn my face mask, very happily as well.
Who knows? To be honest, speaking of face masks, I just as like a personal note, I'm going to continue to wear them on the walk to school in the winter, because they make everything feel so much warmer. And it makes sense. A piece of cloth stuck to my face is able to keep my warm breath like slightly closer to my face, so I'm not cold. But
I would probably say them the opposite. I mean, once I get the lovely vaccine, I am probably going to have a nice bonfire at one of those nights with all the COVID masks I've had to buy.
Well, yeah, it's to be honest, that's another interesting element of what of the COVID era do we actually keep in our day-to-day lives. But moving on from that, let's talk a bit more about President-elect Joe Biden, and specifically his pick for the Secretary of Defense. So this is a very interesting, and I would argue somewhat controversial pick, as instead of the expected pick, he has gone for retired 4-star General Lloyd Austin, who is a former commander of the U.S. military Central Command, and has been a long time, I guess, what was the sort of word you'd use? A person who has cooperated with Biden. He cooperated with him a lot with the Obama era policy towards Iraq. So he has known him for quite a long time. So I'll just quickly go on to why this is controversial, and then I'll ask Peter for his opinions. But the reason this is controversial is because he had only retired from the military in 2016, and the 1947 National Security Act states that commissioned officers are only eligible to be defense secretary 7 years after their retirement in order to maintain this idea of civilian control of the military. And it's something that Democrats have cared about for a very long time. So for him to actually get on to the post, he would have to have, Biden will have to request a waiver from Congress for permission to flout the rule. And President Donald Trump did this for his first Defense Secretary, General James Mattis. But it's going to be, it seems like a very interesting obstacle that Biden's going to have to overcome. I mean, just to quickly give my opinion on Austin's candidacy, I think he is a qualified individual. He has particular, I guess, speciality in regarding logistics, and that's going to be incredibly important with the United States rolling out its COVID-19 vaccine. And also his, I guess, sort of supposed neutrality on a variety of issues. He's not going to be seen as hawkish as some other picks that could possibly have been chosen. But he definitely is going to be a controversial pick. So what do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I will say, I will say, you know, I don't really like the pick. I mean, Austin's not my type of, military guy, but I mean, he's a qualified individual. I understand a lot of people are concerned about civilian control. I won't be very candid here since this is an opinion show. I'm not really that concerned about it. I think he's been retired long enough. It's 4 years to understand what.
I mean, they had talked about, I believe, I don't actually remember how long ago it was, maybe 4 years ago, or maybe under Obama, where they talked about actually reducing it from 7 years to 5 years.
Yes.
So clearly, for some, and evidently Biden, it doesn't seem to be too big of an issue.
Well, yeah, and it used to be 10 years, but and it was only back in 2008 they changed it to 7 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
sorry, I'll let you go ahead.
I mean, no, I think Austin's a qualified guy. I mean, Joe Biden's gonna have a lovely time, having to convince his own members of his caucus to get them to vote for the waiver. I mean, it will be funny if Joe Biden has to ask for Republican votes on his defense pick for the waiver, which would be Mitch McConnell's, delight.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't really have an issue with a military guy running the Pentagon because the Pentagon itself is a militarist place, and I think he or she, whoever it would have been in that case, would listen to numerous advisors. And I don't honestly have a problem with someone who's maybe seen war firsthand and knows their colleagues a little well to be there. I mean, I don't think defense secretaries are pushed by any difference of being a civilian or being being in the defense industry as a fighter, because at the end of the day, I think it's a subjective job. I mean, the people who think, oh, he's going to listen to his friends. It should be noted, of course, that Austin is not a hawk. Even from when he was in the armed services, he was known more as a dove compared to some other generals of the time who were more hawkish than him.
He oversaw the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq, after all. So there's clearly, something that plays into it. And the reason why I described him as sort of more of a neutral figure is that he's, compared to giving a Democrat, a sort of a backbencher or someone who is very vocal on foreign policy and defense positions, is that he isn't going to be front and center on every single news channel referring to his policies or whatever. He's definitely going to be very more behind the scenes, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, and I mean, the other two generals who have had the privilege of serving as Secretary of Defense, George Marshall and Jim Mattis, were all, quiet individuals on their own right. I mean, even Jim Mattis, when he was Trump's Secretary of Defense, was not very known for getting publicly involved in stuff. He just, did a lot of his job behind the closed doors.
Yeah. And the reason I just wanted to mention further that this has to pass through both houses of Congress. So
Yes.
the reason this is going to be very difficult is because a number of Democrats have already stated that they, because they care about this rule of civilian control of the military, they will ensure that they don't actually pass this waiver. So it represents a major challenge for Biden. Now, the reason this is so interesting is because presumably they would have had to have worked out the political calculus behind the scenes and seeing if they had the votes on hand. But presuming that polarization continues and only a few Republicans are actually going to stick to voting through Austin, then it makes it a very difficult situation in which, Biden is going to have to try and convince more Republicans than he's going to be able to convince Democrats. And it's going to look great for news headlines to say that Republicans were able to sink his defense nominee because of internal opposition within the Democrats, sort of that, Democrats in disarray story we love hearing about all the time. So it's creating a very, very difficult situation where there isn't any real clear idea of if it's something that could possibly pass, and especially because of how slim the majority is in the House of Representatives.
Well, yeah, and it will be. I mean, we have already Biden will be choosing to already have 2 people from the House already going into his administration, and possibly a third. So that already puts his majority on a very dicey corner.
Exactly. That's the real element of this. Is it is such a risk. It is such a risk, and there were a number of different possibilities which Biden ultimately could have gone for. That probably would have been much easier. So there's real questions there about why is he so special that they want to really force him through.
Oh yeah, and I mean, there is something to be said, of course, about what is occurring, and I think he saw something in Austin. I mean, I do recall after the election when we had our post-election show, we were talking about Michelle Flourier as the front runner for the job,
Yeah.
and it looks like when he did the interviews that she and him didn't seem to blend. And I mean, I will say this: Michelle Flourier is an absolutely qualified individual to lead the Department of Defense. I mean, it's just as much when Jim Mattis took over the department, he asked her to be his number 2, and she only declined because of politics, but she's a very qualified figure. And I think, look, Austin now has a very big, important role coming up to him. I mean, his background isn't terrible, but a lot of them do not meet a lot of the challenges the United States faces today. I mean, he has no background in Asia. Obviously, yes, I know he was in the Middle East, but not in Southeast Asia with that.
Which is especially important because of the sort of hostility. Well, not less hostility, but the actual engagement with the U.S. military in the Pacific.
Mm-hmm. And look, he's held more staffing technical roles, but he's never held outside of Central Command. A big department. And it should be noted, when he was at Central Command, he did run into criticisms from some individuals, mainly the late Senator John McCain, of being a bit in-depth with his position, because of this was around the time of the rise of ISIL, and the concern that certain things weren't being taken seriously. So I think it will be interesting to see how he has to deal with it. I mean, he's going to have a very hostile hearing, even if he does get confirmed with the waiver and the actual confirmation. Because obviously, it's a very important job. And I mean, he, unlike many generals, generals who get rumored for Secretary of Defense or have been asked to do the job, Mattis and Marshall, he doesn't have that pedigree or big nameness. I mean, Mattis was his successor at Central Command, but Mattis was also a larger-than-life figure with what he commanded with his troops.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. That's some great comments on the real difference in the type of general.
I mean, on this point about picks, since we do have some extra time, I mean, this is better than I think he would be my loser of the week, but he's not special enough to hit this. But Pete Buttigieg really thinking, I want to be ambassador to China is a really powerful job than being OMB director. What a questionable logic that was.
Well, here's the fascinating thing is that who Biden has chosen, it's basically no real front runners of the Democratic Party. He definitely seems to be lining up Kamala Harris as the real, to basically be the front runner in 2024.
Yeah, 2024, 28, yeah.
Yeah, it's particularly interesting because of who he has just not given these important roles to. I mean, it was talked about that maybe he would be, U.S. ambassador to the UN, but now it's looking like it may just be ambassador to China, and it's been a sort of dead end for Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah, and I mean, turning on the OMB spot, really, if the rumors are correct, is really questionable considering it's a powerful position compared to being ambassador to China. I mean,
Yeah,
sure,
exactly.
being an ambassador is nice, but most ambassadors don't have any power considering the fact that most decisions are made at the White House and the State Department.
You know what? Maybe, yeah. I mean, to be honest, if I was talking about what I wanted to do with the next 4 years of my life, maybe I would go for ambassador of
Well, I mean,
China.
I wouldn't mind being an ambassador, but I wouldn't want to be ambassador to China, especially with everything that's going on. I'd much rather take an ambassadorship somewhere in Europe.
Yeah, very true.
Hey,
Yeah,
it's better than the rumored ambassador to the UK now is rumored to be a Comcast executive. So why not?
well, there we are. But then, you know what? You know what? Rumors in this age of Biden cabinet picks have just never really lived out so far.
Yeah, I mean, Comcast now owns Sky, so it'd be perfect.
Oh no, maybe some conflicts of interest there, but who knows?
Oh, well, conflicts of interest don't exist in America, my friend. I'm joking, of course. You just pay
I mean,
the.
yeah, there we are. But if that's all, we'll move on to everyone's favorite time of year. I did a little pun there because it's the time person of the year. Everyone doesn't care when they figure out who it actually is. But this year it is President-elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. What are your thoughts, Peter?
So I'm going to keep myself at a minimum here because I could really go on a nasty tirade on this selection. I don't think he merits being the time person of the year. And this is no offense to Mr. Biden and Harris, which is also odd that they put two of them on this when it's usually one person. I just don't think, outside of beating the president, that it's such a big accomplishment to make a person of the year. This isn't such as a monumental occasion like other presidents. I mean, this is a different year. I mean, I think it should have been the frontline workers, just of everything they've had to go through with COVID. And I think that's really the group who should have had it. I mean, my number two group would have just been Black Lives Matter, just because of that whole global movement that was set off that. I just don't think Biden and Harris merited even being in the top tier of what would you consider the person of the year? Person, not persons.
Well, you know what? I share the same opinion, really. To be honest, time person of the year, when you're not looking, I mean, okay, I understand the rationale behind him being time person of the year. He's, unseated Donald Trump because of how monumental Donald Trump has been to politics over the last 4 years. To completely shift that obviously represents, someone who's done something this year. But I mean, my main issue here is, what did Kamala Harris do?
I mean, what is her main? Oh, I don't know what has occurred, but I think we've lost Adam. Apologies on that. I don't know what happened, but are
Oh, completely sorry about
you
that.
there?
Clearly, clearly President, VP-elect Kamala Harris was listening and tried to use the NSA to shut me down. No, I'm kidding, of course. But I accidentally clicked off the tab. Anyway, so as I was saying, yes, I disagree with it, obviously, for that reason. I agree with you. It probably should have been something like frontline workers or something, wholesome like that. But the real interesting elements, just like the Nobel Peace Prize, is who cares anymore?
Yeah.
I don't. I don't think it matters. I mean, I'm sure Biden would love to put it on his resume, but beyond that, I don't. It doesn't matter. I mean, ever since, to be honest, I don't think it's ever mattered since I've been declared a Times Person of the Year in 2007, which is my favorite joke to always tell everyone. But yeah, I think it's pointless now. I don't understand.
Yeah, and I think some of the over the years, I mean, they've made some questionable calls. I mean, about who they've given it to. I mean, there's the famous 2001 thing. And yeah, Rudolph Giuliani helped revive the city of New York, but he wasn't the Person of the Year in 2001. It was Osama bin Laden for committing such a horrible act. I mean, 2007 they gave it to Putin. Arguably, it should have gone to David Petraeus for doing the surge in Iraq.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, I understand Barack Obama being it in 2008. That's
it was a historic achievement.
Yep. But Pope.
I mean, just like Bush winning in 2004, it was it was.
Sorry, but Pope Francis in 2013 as well, or
yeah, he got shrugged in 2013. Like, there are many questionable picks. I mean, last year, Greta Thunberg, yes, was a very influential thing. But I'd argue the Joshua guy from Hong Kong, was more deserving of that than her. And I just say this because of the sheer bravery he took, and going against the Chinese, regime, and putting his life in danger to tackle injustices as he saw.
I mean, to be honest, here's the thing. They've done some great takes, like 2011, The Protester, I think, the Arab Spring, the Tea Party movement, the Occupy movement. There's a variety of broad groups there. But yeah, as you say, they've made some really bad calls. And that's why I don't care anymore, is that, it loses its sort of validity after a while. For a lot of the time, they just go, oh, damn, it's a presidential year. Who got elected? And then choose them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, just looking to, I mean, 2018 comes to mind. I mean, their Person of the Year was, I forget what, just a nobody. And if it doesn't matter. It's just like you mentioned, the Nobel Prize doesn't really matter anymore. Nobel Peace Prize, I should say. The other Nobel Prizes tend to stick to what they were intended for. But yeah, I mean, it's quite a meh point. But anyway, besides beating the dead stick on the Time magazine, which is already losing money anyway, we now move to the good old Loser of the Week. And Adam will kick off his Loser of the Week.
Okay. So my Loser of the Week actually relates directly to the Times Guardian of the Year, which was Fauci this time around. Actually, no, my Loser of the Week is Taiwanese Health and Welfare Minister Chen Shih-chung. The reason I think he is, well, to be honest, he is the real deserved winner of Guardian of the Year, because he led such an effective response to the coronavirus pandemic within Taiwan, to the extent where he got a 91% approval rating within the country. I just think that overall he was maybe snubbed a bit for Guardian of the Year, given, I mean, no offense to Dr. Fauci, of course, because he was given a very difficult set of circumstances in which to engage with this. But he didn't lead a very effective response. Even when he was the one dictating a lot of elements of it, still didn't lead to something that was the strongest. But you know what? I will, bring out my banner and say that Chen Qisheng should have won, and I will be writing to Time to let them know that I'm very upset.
They've seen the lawlessness.
You got me there.
My loser of the week, it comes from Romania, and is the former Prime Minister Ludovic Orban, no relation to Viktor Orban, of course. Who Romania had elections over the weekend. And Mr. Orban's party, the center-right party, which he had been in government for just over a year, the National Liberal Party, gained seats at the said election against the more left-of-center party, who had the most seats. But Mr. Orban came in second, and in his mind, that was a personal disappointment. So the governing coalition actually increased its majority, but didn't actually get the first amount of seats. And in Orban's mind, that was a disappointment, and he resigned. And now Romania is being led by an acting prime minister whose solid experience was being Minister of Defense in the current government, and was a former Chief of Staff at Defense.
Well, there we are. A very interesting election, to be honest. Quite a disappointing one for those who were hoping for the sort of corrupt elements of Romanian politics to disappear. But evidently it didn't. In fact, the real interesting element, just to talk about it for a second, is the AUR, which is sort of a, I guess, radical right kind of party who wants to merge Romania with Moldova, reunification of the two countries. They won. They got 9% of the vote, which was way more than anybody was expecting. It ranged from them just reaching the threshold, or barely coming above it, or falling short. They overperformed expectations massively. And yeah, I mean, they're really not the losers of the week. But
they're a winner of the week.
They're the real winner. But yeah, maybe that's a segment idea. But anyway,
yeah, maybe it is.
Cool, yeah, we really need those. Anyway, if that
it's better than Joe Swenson's council, rejecting a swim pool last year, costing her a seat. No sting to test.
You don't need to sting me like that every single time it comes to the end of an episode. Maybe actually, to be honest, there's the new segment. Let's make fun of Adam.
Well, hey, I mean, there's always room to take fun of me, of course, as well.
Yeah, but I mean, but then I have to think about that kind of thing.
Well, to be fair, you're not terrorists who go after on a religious occasion, with Iowa.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna an American football joke, but I wouldn't know where to start. But anyway,
yes,
I think that's all there is for this week, and we will make sure that we continue to present the world's news in the most effective way in the following weeks. Hopefully,
indeed,
we'll be at home and there won't be people in the background, but there we are.
Yes, indeed. And also, before we leave, please, all of you, please subscribe to YouTube to find all our old videos, or Spotify, or any podcast service you do. Or follow us on Twitter to catch this episode on the daily appearances. Anyway, it's now we've reached the end, and I want to thank all of you for bearing in with us in the background and my noise, and Adam for leading the show today.
It's no problem at all. Clearly, in the background, they're actually just our endearing fans that are coming to stalk Peter's house because they really want to get their chance on the World Tonight show. But we won't let we'll only let you all know that. But anyway, as I said, thank you all. It's been very fun to do the introduction this time, and I will hopefully.
We'll make sure to give it to you next week.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you all.